Hello guys and welcome back to a new video. We got a patch a few days ago, and instead of just posting a quick patch notes video on the spot, I took the time to read and examine these changes in the lab, test interactions, and see what's actually possible after some of those changes, because I think in Tekken numbers don't tell you the full story. We're going to break this video into parts, starting with the universal changes and then moving into the important character changes, character by character. But this time I'm doing things a little bit different. Instead of just going through everything in order, I'm actually going to rank these changes based on impact. Some of these changes are way bigger than they look. Some are completely misleading on paper and some barely change anything at all. So as we go through the video, you'll start to see why certain changes are placed way higher than others. Without further ado, let's get right into it. First, let's talk about the universal changes. And honestly, removing heat regeneration moves is a huge step in the right direction. This change directly targets the absurd non-stop aggression and low-risk pressure that a lot of characters were abusing. Now obviously, some characters got hit way harder than others. For example, Martial Law heavily relied on heat regeneration through nunchucks, combos, slide pressure, and constant looping offense. So this change is going to affect him a lot more than some other characters. Meanwhile, characters like Jack barely care about this change. Jack only had 2 heat regen moves, and realistically, most Jack players weren't even thinking about regenerating heat in the first place because those situations were super conditional and hard to consistently benefit from. The second major universal change is the nerfing of a lot of safe pressure tools across the roster. A lot of moves got toned down to limit non-stop pressure and reduce situations where you were forced to endlessly hold mix-ups with little room for counterplay. And this is where the patch gets really interesting because some of these frame changes completely change certain interactions. So now, let's start going character by character, beginning with the S tier changes. Starting with Armor King, his up back one goes from +8 to +5, and the difference here is actually huge in real gameplay. At +5 now, you can actually step his heat down back to 1 instead of just respecting it. So what used to be a completely brainless plus frame situation into pressure now turns into a real risk reward. Armor King can't just autopilot that sequence anymore. He actually has to respect movement and decision making after it. And then his heat bad 3-2 goes from +5 to -9. This one doesn't need much explaining. That move is basically dead now. Azucena, her heat stance tools back 2 forward, back 1-1-2 forward, and lib 1-2 forward all go from +7 to +4. And +4 might not sound like much, but in stance pressure it is a lot. You now actually have room to challenge anyhow. You're not forced to just hold the mix anymore. You can interrupt, you can step, or even use options like Gamma Hold depending on the situation or the move Azucena goes for. So her stance pressure is still there, but it's no longer no counterplay allowed pressure. Clive is where things get more interesting. A lot of his heat strings, down forward 1-1-1, down forward 1-1-2-1, up 1+2 extensions all go from -8 to -12. And this is still a layered situation. After down forward 1-1, he has multiple options. He can finish the string, he can transition into stance, or he can go into his mid-high extension, which is safe. So even though the numbers are worse, the real issue is still the structure, because stance transition still forces you into a read. If you try to challenge, you risk getting clipped. If you block, you still have to deal with stance pressure. If he continues the full string though, it is now -12, and that's the only way you can benefit from it. Otherwise, it's still a mind game. On top of that, his forward 1+2 no longer gives a full launch, and instead now only gives a follow-up, which is honestly a big deal for how explosive he used to be. And the second nerf is mainly why I put the Clive changes in S tier. Moving on to June, her heat 1+2 now has increased with recovery by 9 frames and it is throwable. This one is a simple nerf, but it is very good, because that move was completely broken. Spammable parry with way too little risk now finally has actual commitment behind it and can be punished due to its whiff recovery. Moving on to Lydia, her Heaven and Earth 2 goes from +6 to +2. Her heat 1+2 goes from +10 to +6, and the max hold goes from +15 to +10. Same with heat SWS2. And the main idea here is very simple. Her endless pressure loops are finally toned down. You're no longer stuck in constant plus frame situations where you have to hold back and guess. There's finally room for counterplay. Power crushes, interrupts, and situational movement all become viable against her. She's still very strong, but she's no longer locking you into the non-stop pressure cycle. Lily, Rab 4, Heat, Do, Glide 1-4, and Forward 4 with 3+4 all go from +7 to +5. Small changes, but very important. It stops her from freely converting into Heat Smash setups, which used to make her momentum way more explosive. Now, it forces more honest pressure instead of automatic flowchart pressure. Reina, Heat, down 2, 1+2 goes from +7 to +5. And this one is actually very important in real matches. It used to force a true 50-50 situation, but now at +5 you can actually option select it with the duck jab timing. She still has the answer to that, but it's no longer a forced guess where you're completely locked down. That wraps up the S tier changes. Next up, we got the A tier changes. Starting with Brian. SNE forward 1+2 goes from +5 to -9. This move served a lot of purposes for Brian. It was a pressure tool, a keep out tool, and because of its reversal properties, it also worked as a very annoying passive aggressive option. Now that the frame advantage is gone, the move becomes significantly weaker, and on top of that, the reversal itself was nerfed. Previously, if you blocked the reversal, Brian was +15. Now both players are back to neutral at 0. Overall, a very solid nerf. Eddie is next up in the A tier with his Heat quarter circle forward 4 going from +9 to +7. For most of the cast, this is an A tier change. It technically opens up a few more options such as power crushing, some of the mid follow-ups, but realistically, Eddie still has strong lows from stance, so the counterplay isn't dramatically different. For Jack though, this is honestly closer to an S tier change. At +7, it's much easier to backdash the casino mix at certain ranges because of Jack's unique herb boxes and movement interactions. I'm pretty sure a few other characters can do this as well, but for Jack players, this is a very noticeable change for Eddie. Fang's Heat 3+4 goes from +12 to +7. For a lot of characters, Duck Jab becomes a very strong answer here, and it removes a huge portion of Fang's back turn options. For Jack though, it's a little different, because Jack can duck jab from full crouch due to down 1 occupying that input. His fastest option is an 11 frame while standing 4. That means trying to challenge directly can trade with Fang's sweep, and we don't want that. So for Jack specifically, backdashing is usually the better answer. Still a very good nerf overall. Heihachi's Heat up forward 4-1 goes from +2 to -3. Outside of the chip damage and damage nerfs he received, this is actually one of my favorite changes. Heihachi could use up forward 4 as a keep out tool while also stealing momentum against Jack's down back 1. Now at -3, it's your turn. Simple change, but a very important one. Lars's Heat forward 3+4 loses its power crush properties. Not much to explain here. The main benefit is that you can now keep out Lars much more safely without worrying about getting armored through and forced into a mix-up. Good quality of a life change if you ask me. Leo's LTG forward 2-4-3 goes from +3 to -3. And when transitioning into stance, it goes from +6 to 0. This is another change I really like because it forces Leo players to think before automatically going into stance. Without the stance transition, the move is simply -3 and it's your turn. But with the stance transition, things become more interesting. Leo can either use a power crush to beat your fastest option or commit to a stance mix-up using lows, mids, or homing attacks. From what I've tested, sidestep right seems to be a very strong answer here because it beats most of the threatening options while also helping condition the power crush. And once the Leo starts respecting that and using slower options, you can start challenging more aggressively with while standing 1 and potentially get a launch. Overall, this is exactly the kind of change I like seeing. The stance is still strong, but now there is actual counterplay. Miyarizu Heat Boa 3 no longer launches and only grants a follow-up. Pretty self-explanatory nerf, and honestly I'd like to see more Heat launchers removed from the game. Next up is Victor. Heat down back 1+2 goes from +9 to +6. This change finally opens up some room for counterplay. At +6, options such as sidestepping, parrying, and even interrupting certain AI transitions become possible depending on the situation. Now I wouldn't necessarily recommend challenging every time, but the important thing is that Victor doesn't get to force these situations as easily as before. The bigger change in my opinion though is to his AI down 2 going from +8 to +5. This is a really good nerf. A lot of Victor's absurd wall pressure came from forcing these heavily advantaged situations where you were stuck respecting the follow-up mix. At +5, there are significantly more defensive options available. Power Crush becomes a much stronger answer against the mid follow-ups, which means Victor players will have to think a lot harder about their offense and commit more often to the low options if they want to keep you locked down. Overall, a very solid change and definitely enough for Victor to land in A tier. For our final A tier change, we got Xiaoyu Hypnosis 2 goes from +9 to +5 during the final step. I'm not going to pretend I fully understand every implication of this change yet, but on paper, it's a very good nerf. Going from +9 to +5 opens up a lot more defensive options, whether that's a gamma hold, movement, or situational challenges depending on your character. If any Xiaoyu specialists in the comment have additional information on this one, definitely let us know. Now let's move on to the normal changes. These are the changes that either don't significantly affect the character's game plan or simply don't create enough new counterplay to rank any higher. Starting with Asuka. Her install forward 1+2 goes from +11 to +7. At first glance, this looks like a pretty big nerf, but honestly I don't think this change accomplishes much. Even at +7, Asuka still has plenty of strong options afterwards and can still force you to respect her offense. So while the numbers change, the actual interactions remain largely the same. That's why I only have this as a normal change. Next up is Nina. Her heat back 1+2 goes from +2 to 0. The move also received a 10-point damage nerf, which is honestly the more meaningful part of the change. With the amount of pushback this move creates, going from +2 to 0 doesn't really change how the situation is played. Overall, a pretty minor adjustment. Steve's heat back 1+2 now has reduced tracking on whiff for the 3rd through 5th hits. This can definitely matter in certain situations where you're able to sidestep and punish the follow-up when they whiff, but realistically, those situations are pretty specific, and it doesn't fundamentally change how Steve operates. A decent nerf, but nothing game-changing. And that's it for the normal changes and for the patch as a whole. Overall, I think this is a step in the right direction. A lot of these changes seem focused on reducing force pressure, creating more room for counterplay, and making players think a little more before running offense. Before I go through, I actually want your opinion on something. For this video, I intentionally delayed uploading instead of rushing out a patch notes recap as soon as the update dropped. I wanted to spend some time looking at the changes, testing interactions, and understanding what they actually mean in real matches rather than just reading numbers off of a screen. So let me know in the comments, would you rather see patch coverage immediately when it drops, or do you prefer this kind of deeper breakdown where we take some time to understand the changes first? I'm genuinely curious because your feedback helps me figure out what kind of content provides the most value for you guys. As always, thank you to everyone supporting me and supporting the grind. I appreciate every view, every comment, every member, and everyone who takes the time to watch these videos. Also, I'm currently working on a Kunimitsu anti-guide. Members should have access to it sometime next week, and it will be released on the channel a few days after that. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.